Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Today is March the 2nd, 2018. Strong hand. Long-term thinking. All right, everyone. We've got two legendary guests on the show today, and they are linked to below. You know these two guys really well. Simon Dixon and Ansel Lindner. Welcome back to the show. We are going to jump right into this with Simon Dixon, who is walking around the streets of London town right now, back in Britain, where it's nice and cold. It has been an incredibly calm week in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Usually there's drama and price drops and all sorts of FUD, but this was a calm week. So I'm going to open up with Simon Dixon. Can we expect more weeks like this in the future? What was this week all about? And is there anything that I left out? Were there some big stories you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, we do get moments like this in crypto. We haven't had them for a while. The drama in Bitcoin and the crypto sector always continues. But I do remember we have these phases of consolidation in prices where Bitcoin really finds a price that the market is satisfied by. And at the moment, it seems like Bitcoin is hitting the price that the market thinks it should be valued at right now. And then what tends to happen is you get lots and lots of innovation from there. And the market, a new opportunity or a new paradigm opens up for Bitcoin. And that tends to lead to, catalyze a new, massive volatility, massive increases or decreases in prices, whatever the news might be. And that tends to lead to, some Bitcoin haters or people that have got alternative agendas trying to create some drama. And then you go back to volatility. We've seen this cycle quite a few times. But we have had a lot of action from the regulatory side and the SEC. So we've seen the SEC and the CFTC, the last couple of weeks, they had their Senate hearing. They were discussing how really Bitcoin is the only thing that's not like a security. And they consider everything else a sort of security. And the reason that they consider Bitcoin not a security is because it has a lot more commodity-like features in that there was no real founder, there was no real founding team, and therefore they find it a lot harder to categorize that as some kind of currency or some kind of commodity or some kind of stock, like a lot of the other, ICOs have more features of stocks and some of the other things look into these different characters, but we've had lots in terms of that. And then the SEC is coming on full force with their enforcement actions. And what they tend to be focused on right now is people that did do ICOs that never complied with securities laws. And then some of the things that they've really been focused on is people saying that they've raised more than they actually have. So we've seen a couple of investigations where people are, going out saying that they're raising a couple of $100 million, and then the market believes that they've raised a couple of $100 million, and therefore, but actually the numbers that they actually raised are significantly less. And the other thing that they seem to be discussing about with ICOs as well is this concept of what's really happening with venture capitalists, professional investors, negotiating huge discounts and bonuses on tokens, and then really, pushing those to retail after it hits. Sorry, we've got sirens here. I'm on the streets of London, as we said. And some of the shenanigans that have been going there. So it looks like we're moving towards a lot of the public market rules going into a lot of these token sales. I've seen quite a lot of action. I was in Mexico at the Anarchapulco conference and Satoshi Roundtable, and I'm just passing through London on the way to Isle of Man. And so, yeah, I'm seeing some action, but maybe you're seeing some quiet stuff. Where are you, Adam? You in the States?
I am in Australia, here in Darwin, Australia, where it's very peaceful, to say the least. But wait, you were at the roundtable? You were at the Satoshi roundtable?
Yeah, so I've been for the last few years, and this one was in Cancun.
Oh, well, tell us what happened there. I didn't know you were there. Here's an exclusive. This is good.
Well, the rules of the roundtable is it's all Chatham House rules, but some of the things that people were really interested in discussing were things like securities, tokens. The Bitfinex team were there giving an update on the Tether situation, and Ron Paul was actually there as well, doing a guest appearance. So that's kind of, and then it's more everyone just kind of hanging out and relaxing a little bit. Okay. And then there was a couple of weeks and over to the Anarchapulco conference. What's the next one?
Yeah, that one I've definitely heard about that one. We had Gabriel from Venezuela chime in from there, and we'll talk soon about the Venezuelan petro. Everyone, remember, pound that like button. Check out the link section below to see these guys, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Ansel, what do you think about this SEC stuff? What do you think about this week in Bitcoin that was really calm? Are we going to have more like this, or any other big stories that we missed out on, or was it really as calm as I thought it was?
I thought it was pretty calm. I mean, I think price drives a lot of the news. And so if price is being very volatile, then you're going to have lots of news stories to try to explain that, or that causes news with the price movements. And when the price is very stable, the news cycle just slows down itself. So I think the underlying story is the consolidation, like Simon was saying. I mean, the mempool is calm. Segwit usage is going up. Difficulty is relatively, or hash rate is relatively stable, increasing at that 5% every 2 weeks. So it's very standard and nice and slow. So there's not a lot of source of FUD or news at this point. The SEC stuff, when I think of the SEC, I think of, this is why we're decentralized, right? I said a long time ago that decentralization isn't just a nice thing to have. Decentralization is mandatory for these type of projects because they're going to come after you. And if all these ICOs and all these altcoins aren't decentralized, why do they need a blockchain? You got to really ask yourself that, because it's just silly, scammy marketing at this point. But I do want to point out that the bad thing isn't the illegal security structure or whatever that the SEC is going to get these guys over. The bad thing is that they're scams, right? I don't have any problem with illegal securities. I have a problem with just the scammy idea behind them. So that's all I got.
Okay, this is an interesting topic there. Do you have Simon, any thoughts on that? And feel free to ask each other questions.
Yeah, I mean, so, I shared a very similar view for a long time. What I've come to terms with, at Bank to the Future, we've seen a lot because we were always doing equity in this round, and then suddenly all these tokens come along, and everything changes. Investors no longer want to invest in equity of companies because they're more interested in tokens because of liquidity, and companies are no longer issuing equity anymore when they can issue tokens, or that's definitely within our niche. And now every single startup, every single Silicon Valley company is, they're all looking at tokens. And really, although we can look at the scammy side of it, what I think the true innovation that's kind of come from this is that ICOs created a self-funding mechanism whereby people could experiment with different ideas around decentralization or not decentralization. And rather than having to go to VCs and have to explain your business model, you kind of had, the scrutiny of lots and lots of people that may be wise or dumb or whatever you want to call them. But it created a self-funding mechanism, and I believe that it's actually catalyzed Bitcoin a lot, because one of the significant user cases of Bitcoin is being the world reserve cryptocurrency for cryptocurrencies. And the fact that everybody trades these into and out of Bitcoin has become a significant user case for Bitcoin, where people are going towards Bitcoin in times of, where ICO uncertainty, and then they're using ICOs as a way of accumulating more Bitcoin in many cases, and speculating on that. And the cold hard reality is this, that every single financial product right now, especially as it gets more regulatory clarity, is all moving towards tokenization. And it's for the following reason. There's not a person under the age of 35 that's ever going to want to invest in a stock or bond, a fund, an ETF, or anything. The cold hard reality is, and this is what the SEC was focusing on, is that the younger generation, the younger people, they do not feel connected with traditional financial products in any way, shape, or form. And almost all of them entered their first form of trying to invest and trying to accumulate savings and not spending and taking on excessive debt on credit cards because they entered the cryptocurrency market. So it's created a whole generation of, some would call gamblers and speculators. But you could also look at it as young people that are actually looking at saving and investing for the very first time. And while they might get burnt on some of these things, they feel a connection to the things that you might think are a bit stupid, but they might be really behind. And so cryptocurrencies has given that opportunity. And it's really, I believe, creating a whole generation of savers and investors and speculators that would never have entered the market. And so if you're an investment bank or you're a traditional financial product, you now have no choice, because the only way to engage the younger generation now that own Bitcoin and own these different cryptocurrencies is to actually do tokenization. And that is moving billions, and I predict trillions, away from traditional financial players. And now, we are moving truly into this global market of all sorts of very strange, weird behaviors that we've never seen before. And so while Bitcoin came along and said, well, let's create a monetary system that operates outside of traditional finance, these tokens have come along and said, well, let's create another system that works outside the traditional venture capital, private equity, IPO model. And, if these things are going to be securities, you've now got every single broker-dealer, financial institution, business in the world that now has to adjust to this model, and there's no turning around from this right now. So, it's such an interesting time in financial history. And if we're looking at it from the perspective of a Bitcoiner, which we often do, we think of it in terms of competing currencies, when none of these things are really competing currencies. They're just, they're penny stocks. That's essentially what they are. They're disrupting the IPO market. They're disrupting the venture capital market. They're disrupting the private equity market. And now every single product, real estate, all of them, commodities, they're all going to be backed on these blockchains. They're going to be tokenized. And that's because even if it doesn't do anything differently, it's engaged, a massive percentage of the population that were never going to invest and that were never going to save, and their destiny was simply to take on more credit card debt if it wasn't for this new asset class that's kind of come to be.
Wow, that was a great point about 35-year-old and younger. Continue. That was good stuff. Ansel, yeah, you're about to say something.
Yeah, I think there's a really good learning point here that I agree that lots of things are going to be tokenized, but that's a cryptography thing. That's not a blockchain thing, right? Like, you don't need decentralization. That actually makes it more risky. You have to have a network that's decentralized, has proof of work, all of these things. And that adds a whole nother aspect to this, right? So what I don't like is that they use the term blockchain to obscure the truth. blockchains are supposed to be decentralized proof of work. So these scams are just obscuring the truth from their investors. I think maybe the SEC, who knows, in next year or 2 years, because there always seems to be, they seem to be 2 to 4 years behind the rest of the space here. Maybe in 2 years they're going to say, well, if you try to sell something using the word blockchain and you're not decentralized, then we're going to come down on you, right? So I think we need to learn the difference between cryptography and tokenization versus blockchains. And
yeah, I think that's
definitely a fair point.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a really good point. But also, what the interesting scenario is that now regulators could come along and say, look, we want to get hard on people saying the word blockchain and misrepresenting what they're doing when really they're building on top of some other blockchain or whatever it might be. And, you know, this word blockchain is definitely confusing people, and decentralizing everything for the sake of decentralization is definitely, you know, the ICO of 2017 and probably the ICO of 2018. But, you know, these trends are going to change. I think the market's kind of wising up to these things. And the interesting thing is that even if the SEC goes all aggressive, well, all that's going to do is it's just going to say, we'll stop taking on US investors, because countries are competing now on the global scale. You know, it's not the same power that the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ has or Silicon Valley has. And all it does is it makes Silicon Valley, you know, Wall Street, the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, the worst places to raise finance. And then that will just go to another jurisdiction, you know, whether it be a tiny island like Gibraltar or Isle of Man, or, you know, a larger country that tries to do this. So the SEC's big problem right now is that they recognize that the younger generation are no longer going to invest in these products. And therefore, if you go all clamp down on this and too hard, you know, make sure you focus on the fraud, because if you take the innovation away and you know, then it's just going to go overseas. And really, that's what is happening. Everyone's looking at other countries to locate these things. And then all of a sudden you get an exodus away from Silicon Valley, away from Wall Street, and the US being the world's worst place to raise funding, which is a real turn and shift in power that might be a result of all this.
We're going to have to see how this all turns out. I mean, it's definitely exciting times. The heavy hand of the U.S. government could scare away more people. I am not into the heavy hand whatsoever. But speaking of countries and regulation and cryptocurrency, in the news lately, we've had these countries like Venezuela and Turkey announce they're going to have their own cryptocurrency. Simon and I have talked about these projects in theory in the past, and now they're becoming reality. Ansel, do you see more countries going in this direction, creating their own cryptocurrencies? How legitimate is this? Obviously, they are centralized, and so they're throwing around the term blockchain a lot also.
Yeah, I mean, they won't be decentralized and they won't be censorship resistant, you know, so they're not really competition to Bitcoin. It's actually could provide an easier on-ramp onto Bitcoin. So, and it'll build Bitcoin's medium of exchange, right, between all of these things. And so I think we will see it. Obviously, they don't know what to do right now because Bitcoin is taking over the world basically, and so this is their next step, and we'll probably see a couple of them launch. We've already seen Venezuela. We'll probably see a couple more, and then we'll see something really bad happen, where kind of like to Tether, where Tether was hacked and they just reversed, or they just, you know, totally fixed the problem in like 2 hours because it's all totally centralized. We'll see something like that happen with one of these cryptos, or nation state coins, whatever you want to call them. And people will definitely see the difference between Bitcoin and these coins.
Great point about them being potential great on-ramps for Bitcoin. That's the only one of the big positives I see in them. I mean, I don't see much positive in these, you know, centralized country coins trying to control their people. But I do see it as for creative people in these countries to get a hold of this, your Venezuelan petro and try to turn it into Bitcoin as fast as possible and put yourself in give yourself some financial freedom.
And not only on-ramp for value, but an on-ramp for education, right? It'll make these people start looking in, what the hell is Bitcoin? And they'll see the difference. Yeah,
that's another great point I brought up with Gabriel also. It is an educational point, and people are going to learn about these cryptocurrencies if they're forced upon them. And they'll learn what's real and what's not. Simon, what are your thoughts on this? And does your trip to the Isle, but you mentioned the Isle of Man, that you're on your way there. I'd love to know why you're going there, and that has anything to do with this. I'm just guessing, but that's a country right there. But before we get into that, what do you think about these country coins?
Yeah, so isn't it just a truly fascinating time? Actually, these country coins have very little to do with Bitcoin. They just happen to come into existence because of Bitcoin. And, the fact that Bitcoin exists, and now people have a choice of either owning their own money or depositing at a bank, and more of the younger generation are choosing to own their own money. They might be going in a backwards route by giving it to Coinbase or giving it to an exchange, and then potentially realizing that they don't own it because they gave it to Coinbase or they gave it to an exchange, and then a government decides that that's something they don't want people doing with their Bitcoins, and therefore they start to realize that they can't spend it as freely, just as if they tried to transfer money to the wrong place in their bank, they would start to realize they don't own their own money. And then people realize that people are choosing this. So countries now have to defensively, now that there is competition amongst currencies on a global scale, and there was always currency wars, but Bitcoin introduced this new flavor into the currency war where people can exit the financial system altogether. Governments are now planning what their next moves are. Central banks are now planning what their next moves are. Because they want cash to be illegal, I think what they'd rather do is leverage and use the word blockchain to confuse people, just like many of the ICOs are, and what we were talking about earlier, into thinking that they're doing something truly innovative, when really all they're doing is they're providing an exit so that they can make cash illegal and can trace all transactions. And also they're preparing for systemic risk in their financial system, so that when one of their banks collapse, rather than having to bail them out, they can tap into this new source of money by issuing a new what they're calling a cryptocurrency, and then use that in order to bail that. We saw in Bulgaria that the Bulgarian government seized some Bitcoins from someone that they said was money laundering. And a few years later, they looked at the hard drive. And then when they had that hard drive, they realized that the value of what was on that hard drive is actually worth more than their entire national debt. And that's just a truly fascinating story. And other governments are looking at that and saying, well, what are we going to do if one of our banks goes bust? Where are we going to find the funds? Are we going to allow them to bail in and create a huge systemic risk event in the financial system, or are we going to bail them out and increase and make the taxpayers pay that, or are we going to use some more financial engineering like quantitative easing? Well, I think they're going to choose financial engineering, and the financial engineering that they're going to choose is the central bank is going to issue their own digital currency, and the interesting thing is that means that the central bank is then competing with the retail bank, because the retail bank is the issuer of all digital currency in their country. But now the central bank is going to come along and do that. And that creates competition among central banks and retail banks, where people are going to choose which currency that they want. And then if you don't want to choose to own your own money, then you can choose a true decentralized cryptocurrency that allows you to own it, and that would be Bitcoin. So for me, I see a real interesting development, positive effect from these, and it's just such a fascinating time in history, and just truly changing. And so it's just so fascinating to watch this, and how the different reactions that different governments are going to do. You got the Japan side where they're deciding, well, let's regulate this so we can tax it. Then you've got the China side that says, let's just try and ban all the exchanges so that people can't trade it, through to other countries that are trying to put an outright ban. Maybe India, or, where we don't know where these countries are going. You hear lots of different rumors. And then through to, the SEC that recognize that Bitcoin is an important commodity-like thing within the economy, and the younger generation are all building on top of that, and therefore it's something you can't avoid because it's going to become too disruptive to the traditional financial markets. I just can't believe that this little thing that we've been talking about all these years is just truly becoming so important, so influential on such a grand scale. And it's just truly, an honor to actually be a part of the growth of this industry and watch this all roll out. And so when I see countries, trying to claim that they're doing blockchains or whatever they're doing, it's just such an interesting time to watch, and just, a truly fascinating time in financial history.
Yeah, it really is. We predicted the countries would get into this stuff, and now we're seeing it. So it is really fascinating. Ansel, take over there, baby.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something because I've been doing a lot of research or reading on the past, right? Like the cypherpunks and the history of Bitcoin. And the cypherpunks, they said this is inevitable. Cryptography is inevitable. It's going to take over the world. And I think all of this nation state coin and the ICO stuff that we're talking about, I think this is the cryptography part. And Bitcoin it's almost like the bullet or the thing that has this bow shock, and it's pulling everything, or a boat going through the water and it's pulling everything in its wake, right? So I agree. It's super, super fascinating. But if you expand this into the future, it is truly going to just spread across the world, and everything we know is going to be affected by it.
Yeah, we're on the verge of everything we know being affected by this. That's so exciting if you take a moment to step back and think about it. Simon, again, speaking of countries, I've been hearing about this Isle of Man thing since 2015. You're traveling there?
So Isle of Man, they started in 2014. They were truly the first country to actually put their reputation on the line in order to show some support for Bitcoin. They put together the first, they had a goal, but unfortunately, due to politics, the regulators weren't at a time and place where they could support the government's goals of what they wanted to do. It's truly fascinating when you listen to some of the politicians out there, because they truly get it. Isle of Man is a country that is kind of under the wraps of the Bank of England because they share the currency, the pound. And so therefore, they, if they get out of line with the UK's agenda, then the Bank of England can always threaten in order to take away clearing to their banking system. So the Isle of Man know what it's like to actually be under, siege and attack of a central bank. And so, they truly get what it would actually mean, to actually have Bitcoin the way it was designed to be. So, they wanted to support the cryptocurrency industry. They created a safe haven for gambling businesses in the past, and they wanted to replicate that and create a safe haven for cryptocurrency businesses. However, the banks didn't want to support it, and the Bank of England put some pressure on, saying, this is so far outline of our goals, you better get in check, or there's going to be consequences. But now, cryptocurrency is reaching such a phase right now where they're not necessarily trying to do what other countries are doing, where they're trying to look at their ICOs and how they can control it. They're just truly fascinated by what could happen if they created an environment that can purely support Bitcoin, because they really get the vision of of decentralization. They really get the vision of people being able to own their own money, and they were early adopters in this, and they just needed cryptocurrency to kind of reach a phase whereby they could grow some kind of independence from the pound, or some kind of independence from the banks that weren't supporting the businesses that wanted to relocate to that country. And now it's getting at a size where governments can explore this. They're nimble. They can actually look at what a country could do to actually support decentralization, as opposed to launching their own cryptocurrency and trying to control everything from within. So it's just as I said, this kind of, we started the conversation with ICOs and SEC, and then some of the things that's happening in disruption in finance. Now we look at the national central bank and government level, and now we're looking at the actual country level. And that's the phase that we're at today. So yeah, I mean, Isle of Man, I think a truly interesting country that might play a bigger role in the future of this.
So your trip up there is related to cryptocurrency. Then I didn't think you're just randomly vacationing.
Yeah, Adam, when was the last time you saw me travel somewhere not related to cryptocurrency?
I would hope so, man. That everywhere you go is based on Bitcoin. I guess the people, the island of Man, they don't like that pound button very much. But I say pound that like button.
Yeah, to all 85,000 of them, they can pound the like button.
Exactly. But yeah, they don't like the dominance of the British pound and what England has to say. Very, very interesting. Let them have their own revolutionary war, but a peaceful revolutionary war against the British. Ansel, any additional thoughts on that, or any thoughts or questions before we move on?
Well, one thought and one question, I guess, is I think it's fascinating about how these smaller countries have this huge opportunity to do this, and it's a little bit harder for the large nation state because they have so much inertia and so many financial products that it's hard to move. But with the smaller countries, they have this advantage, which is pretty fascinating to me. Simon, will other similar countries, like, aren't the Canary Islands similar to that? Are they going to do you see similar things happening?
Absolutely. I mean, every country, every government, every central bank, every large bank, every investment bank, they all have their code word for Bitcoin blockchain innovation department. They are all going to be looking at these things. Now, whichever country can successfully execute upon this, whether it be Puerto Rico creating, a blockchain haven for Americans that want to exit in a way that they can, whether it be, small countries like Isle of Man, everyone knows where all the jobs are right now. Everyone knows where all the growth is right now. Everyone knows where where the future is going. And all these countries that want if they want jobs, if they want growth, if they want to leapfrog the NASDAQ, if they want to leapfrog, very powerful currencies, I cannot think of a better bet than betting a percentage of the country's electricity on Bitcoin mining and a percentage of, the central bank's resources into seeing what they can do in terms of putting some Bitcoin on their balance sheet. I cannot think of a more powerful way for a country to bet on how they could actually catch up, leapfrog, and overtake a country like America, China, or Russia that has, a lot to lose from the displacement of some of these currencies, commodities, and things that give them so much power on the global scale. This is David beats Goliath opportunity. This is the small man's opportunity. This is every country should be looking at what they can do here, how they can adjust to it, because they're just going to get left behind, and all the jobs will go somewhere else. And if they're really forward thinking, if they want to protect some of their tax revenues, they either are going to decide that they need a new model because collecting tax in the future in this world might become increasingly more complex, or they're going to actually try and get a hold of it and decide how they can actually tax this industry and catch up and not get falling behind. So I predict every single country, every small country that I visit, they're all looking at what they can do to be a part of this industry.
Forward thinking and that term in government usually doesn't go. It doesn't go together. Right? Governments aren't that forward thinking.
It doesn't. But the difference this time is that there's this force called Bitcoin, which is giving all of people's population choice, And so when you have the choice of Bitcoin or a government that either, gets over controlling over the nation's money supply, then you suddenly have a scenario where governments can no longer exercise such force and such, monopolistic power as they had when they had a monopoly on their national currency. And so while it may not be, you don't associate forward thinking with governments, Bitcoin has changed that. Now governments have to be innovative. Otherwise, their population will eventually, and all their young generation already are, that turn into crypto.
Well, here's a double question for you then that your topic makes people wonder about, and because people love to name names, or they like to hear people name names at least. Do you suspect any government is actually buying up Bitcoin right now? And if so, which government is it? And which country is going to be the next country to jump onto the radar as an innovative country that isn't like one of these small Isle of Man, Puerto Rico, Canary Islands? They're their own countries, but they're still controlled by larger countries. Are there any larger, more independent countries that are going to jump onto the scene like they have? So those are two questions there.
No, the large countries want to control it because they want to, they want to make sure that they're on top of the job creation and the taxes that they can get from this, and make sure their currency isn't a threat, and there isn't some disruption. The small countries are seeing it as an opportunity, and the large countries will not adjust until the small countries become bigger than them. So this is really about the small countries' opportunity to really be on top of what might be one of the largest wealth distributions that we've ever seen in history. And that is what I think we're seeing. And so I don't predict any of the large countries that are in a position of power to be forward thinking until they actually have to. And so it's up to the small countries to come along and say, well, we bet, it's a Bulgaria situation. We accidentally bet on Bitcoin, and now we don't have any national debt. Then that goes from no national debt to we're actually got significant reserves and significant purchasing power. And then, to see past that, where it goes next, whether we move into this, hyper Bitcoinization world that everyone talks about, or whether we lead into an interoperability where Bitcoin not only, at the moment, it's the global reserve cryptocurrency for cryptocurrencies, but maybe it moves to more and more central banks owning it, more and more governments owning it, and then the global cryptocurrency of currencies. And that's the world that people are speculating on. And there's only 21 million of these things, and everyone's going to be competing for them. Everyone's fighting for them. So if you're the type of person that bought them at 10,000, bought them at 20,000 and sold them at 10,000 because you didn't understand the economics, it's probably time to start reviewing that strategy and thinking a little bit longer term and watching more of the Adam Meister, Bitcoin Meisters, Golden Hold. What else have we got, Adam?
Long-term thinking, baby.
Hands.
Strong hand, long-term thinking, guys. This is a great point, because there's going to be some fourth-tier central bank buying up that Bitcoin, and soon they're going to be a second-tier or first-tier country because you sold them your Bitcoin. You didn't have a strong hand. You helped make Bulgaria the most powerful country in Europe, and you're poor. So congratulations, weak hands. That's the type of thing that happens when you sell. But yeah, you're absolutely right. This is the key for these fourth tier, third tier countries to become powerful countries. And once one of them does it, and once all the other third tier countries see one of their fellow countries do that, they're all going to jump on the bandwagon and try to do the same thing. Will it be as effective? Who knows? But I see a pile on eventually. But I look forward so much to the day when we finally hear a confirmation that a central bank is buying Bitcoin. So again, are there any rumors out there, or any names of countries out there that are doing something like that, or is it still too early?
Yeah, you'll never get it, because if that would be incredibly bearish on their national currency. And it would have to be kind of a Zimbabwe situation where a government's given up on their national currency, and therefore they start deciding that we need to disclose that we're purchasing Bitcoin. But just like, you know, Bitcoin decentralizes the banking system and gives everyone the ability to own their own money, it's kind of the same thing at the government level. It's not necessarily that the governments, well, they probably all are accumulating, but I don't think they're disclosing. In fact, at the very least, they're all owning because they need it for ransoms or whatever's coming next. You know, not that they're going to disclose, but it's like in China, one of the big things that they wanted to crack down on was not it was actually corrupt politicians using Bitcoin in order to circumvent capital controls. And so one of the things, it's actually the politicians that are accumulating. Just like when I go and speak, you know, to a fund manager, they're saying, well, we don't have the regulatory structure yet in order to purchase this, but the fund all goes home and they buy it on their personal account. The government doesn't necessarily have the ability to disclose that because it's too bad for their currency. But I can guarantee you that they're all going home and purchasing Bitcoin because they're doing it at their family level and they're thinking about their children's future. And so, you know, they're doing that, and it's all at the personal level as opposed to the institutional level.
Yeah, that's typical of a corrupt government members. They have too big of a national ego to do the right thing and give up on their worthless fiat paper. When they go back home, they're buying up the Bitcoin, and then when they go back to work, they're like, "Oh, our fiat currency is great. Keep on buying it, silly citizens." Ansel, we've left you out of the loop here. I know you got some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I went and talked to my local state regulators here, legislators, to the banking committee, and you know, because they were talking about, or a bit license type piece or bill was proposed, and so I went in there and I said, this is going to chase everybody away. This is regulatory arbitrage, just like Simon was saying. And so my recommendation to them was to give tax breaks to crypto companies, to subsidize mining and subsidize cryptocurrency businesses, Bitcoin businesses that want to come into the state, because this is the next big thing. So I think we could see maybe some of that stuff as well, where these nation states or local states in the United States, they start subsidizing this industry actually to get those companies in. Looking around the world, Simon was talking about small countries, and I think that's true, as of course, but I also think it's the in trouble countries. So countries that have higher inflation rates, they can just print their money and buy Bitcoin with it. It's inflating at 1,000% anyway, right? So might as well just do that. So not only the smaller countries, but some of them that have really bad banking systems, like Italy or Spain or Greece or any of those. And also, I think the Persian Gulf countries are really primed for this because they're looking for something in the future. I think blockchain, quote unquote, blockchain has become part of their like 2030 plans or 2050 plans, whatever they're calling those. So I think that we're going to see a lot of movement in the Persian Gulf countries.
So you're saying when they run out of oil, they need something else? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. No. That's it. It makes a lot of sense. What makes those countries wealthy? They're going to run out of eventually. or it might become obsolete. We might not need oil. We might not need some of these things that someone's drilling out of the desert for them or whatever. But yeah, that's an excellent point. And they're already, some of those desert nations are already built around all sorts of financial shenanigans. So why not build around a real financial rock? Hey, I mean, yeah, good for them. I mean, people should be planning their 2030 and 2050 plans around, if not sooner, their 2020 plans. People remember Bitcoin halving at 20. That's what they should have. For the state of whatever, the state of Utah should have a 2020 Bitcoin plan. I'm just pulling that out of my Utah. No, whatever. All the states, all the little states. And you're right. Offering tax incentives to businesses now is a great bedrock to build on for some of these states in the United States to get ahead of the curve. And instead of coming up with insane regulations like New York, why not come up with some pro-business incentives? Some of these little states, and they'll become much bigger Bitcoin states than than New York.
Yeah,
perhaps.
instead of saying, hey, you can pay your taxes in Bitcoin, like what is that Arizona's trying to do, they should say, well, we will actually pay you to come here.
There you go. That's a lot better. People like to receive than to give up their Bitcoin. Hey man, that would be great if the state was offering people a we don't even want to give you cash, we'll give you Bitcoin. And that'd be, instead of, because who wants to give up their Bitcoin to the government for taxes? That's just like, dude, just give it your fiat. I don't want to. I mean, it's a good sign for Bitcoin that states are willing to take Bitcoin, but you don't want to give up your precious Bitcoin, especially for to pay your taxes. Oh, it just seems like a double whammy. All right. Well, let's move on to some final topic. We got a little bit of time left. We got about 13 minutes left here. Ansel, beforehand we were talking about the Segwit, and that Segwit is up to 30%. I think because Segwit is it's getting rid of the drama cycles it's changing the drama cycle, the FUD cycle. It's something that the FUDsters cannot complain about anymore. So do you see Segwit continuing to grow here? And do you see, we're talking about percentages here, Segwit at 30%. Now Bitcoin dominance, which, it's not the biggest thing in the world, but it is at 40%. It's moved up. So do you see the altcoins making a comeback? And do you see Segwit continuing its role in silencing the FUD?
Well, I started saying on my show, my latest episode, that Bitcoin's dominance is 100%. And to say it's anything less than that is silly, because none of these coins are going to win in a protocol race. Bitcoin is too far ahead on number, quality of developers, number and quality of businesses, and number amount of infrastructure. So there's no way that any of these altcoins will ever catch Bitcoin, at least short of actually finding Satoshi and he sells all his coin. I don't know. I mean, you have to go way out on a limb to say how any sort of altcoin is going to catch Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's dominance is 100% until it's 0%.
Wow, I like that. I might have to throw that into some of my sayings there. It's already 100. Bitcoin dominance is 100%. What do you have to say about that, Simon?
So in terms of the user case, digital goals, there is no competition. That's just a fact. I've often said, in terms of who's going to create the cheapest, fastest way of transferring, creating cash, that's up for grabs, because the cold hard reality of how blockchains work is the least traction you have, the less security you have, then the cheaper and the faster your transactions are going to be. To the centralized database, which is the cheapest and fastest way of doing a transaction. The more security you have under the existing model it means that you're going to have slower and faster transactions until we get the layer 2, which is now made possible because of Segwit adoption. So, it was a bit of a battle whereby I think all of us were disappointed at the rate of adoption of Segwit. That called some questions into why. My personal opinion in why was simply because the large companies had just been through the record-breaking year in terms of transactions. They all, companies like Coinbase and Kraken and Bitfinex all had 100,000 support tickets that they were all trying to deal with. They all had to add 100,000 altcoins to their exchanges, and add a new upgrade into the protocol to the mix. And you're going to have a little bit of delay in time of actually getting those changes through. But now we've got Bitfinex and Coinbase, two of the larger exchanges and wallets, and on ramps to from fiat to crypto, adopting Segwit, and we see an increase in adoption. I'd like to see it move a lot faster, but it's just the nature of the beast. These things take time. We've seen a lot more interesting things come out of Lightning, and so this is all very bullish for perhaps the digital gold user case being extended into other user cases like smart contracts and digital cash and some of the other things that the other blockchains got traction from, because they were optimized for different user cases. And so this is really this is good news to see this. And Bitcoin is really cheap right now. It's really cheap and fast. I don't know whether that's going to last. People are speculating on what that might be. It might be Segwit adoption. It might be the fact that we had a crash and less people are using it. It might be that everyone's using altcoins. Everyone can create their reason, but none of that really matters, because the cold hard reality is that there is no competition for Bitcoin as digital gold. There's lots of competition for cheaper, faster transactions and digital cash and different user cases and interoperability. And so, that's kind of, Bitcoin is still the world reserve current cryptocurrency for all this alternative innovation. And things are going to be a lot more interoperable, but you'll still need that digital gold, bedrock that everything's traded into and out to, and actually is the only truly decentralized thing that's just needed. And there's nothing else like it. I haven't seen anything else like it yet.
Well,
I'd like to push back if I could.
Oh yeah, please.
Respectfully. Yeah. So we got traction on other things besides digital gold, but I don't see that. I don't see that anywhere. Right. You could say, yeah, well, first off, how do you measure that? Right. You're going to measure that against Bitcoin's value. You're going to measure that against the value. So to measure any sort of other niche, you have to use a metric of value. So Bitcoin already owns that niche of value, and I don't understand how people can say that they're getting traction. Their meme, their narrative might be getting traction, but we don't see any like actual productivity, I don't think, on it. Anyways, and also Bitcoin is a smart contract, or Litecoin is a smart contract layer, and we see that being built right now. So I think all these smart contract platforms are going to have to compete against not only a Lightning Network as for cheap transactions, but a Lightning enabled smart contract layer. But I mean, I wanted to push back here because I want to start pushing this education of blockchain versus cryptography versus layer 2 and smart contract platforms. There's a lot of stuff we need to figure out here. And I think the narrative of blockchains are magic has to go away. So.
Okay. Very good. Simon, any thoughts on his feedback? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I semi-agree there, because the only user case other than digital gold that's got traction is, using censorship-resistant transactions where you're willing to accept volatility in price because you want censorship resistance, which is a user case that Bitcoin fulfilled, that Monero is starting to get some of what Bitcoin used to do. And then people are coming along and saying, well, here's a more privacy-centric version, and here's a cheaper and faster version. And the cold hard reality is that it used to be that you could only pay for things in cryptocurrency using Bitcoin, but as a business that pays a lot of our suppliers in cryptocurrency, a lot of people are more willing to accept things like Ethereum because they can just get a transaction faster, and it's cheaper to send. And so people are, just like with the cold hard reality here, the problem that I haven't quite figured out is that if you succeed in any of your user cases, whether that be a smart contract platform like Ethereum, whether your goal is to create digital cash, whether your goal is to be, digital gold, when you have a fixed supply, scarce cryptocurrency, then if it succeeds in its user case, i.e., let's say something does become cash and people start spending it for ice cream and small transactions all around the world, then good cash does not have volatile pricing because you need stability, and people price things in fiat currency. And I don't see anytime soon that anyone's going to start pricing things in cryptocurrency. And most people don't like them pricing in cryptocurrency. If someone comes along to me and says, this is going to cost you 1 Bitcoin, I'll say, please fix the price in dollars, because, I don't want to bet against Bitcoin, and I don't want to have to pay more Bitcoin or less Bitcoin based upon that. So, the user case of cash is one where if they succeed at it, then people move towards exactly what happened with Bitcoin. Originally, people were willing to spend Bitcoins like crazy, but then it started to succeed as censorship-resistant money. And when it started to succeed at being censorship-resistant money, people wanted to spend shit money and keep good money. And so it moves to this store of value because it succeeded at its user case. And then no one really wants to spend it because, you know, they're kind of hoarding it as sound money. Will be the same in any platform. So let's say Ethereum succeeds at building the greatest smart contract platform in the world, and smart contract becomes something that the world's going to use beyond ICOs. Well, eventually, no one will want to use Ethereum because it will be expensive to actually, you know, send Ethereum, and they want to hold it instead. So as the user case succeeds, and there's a scarce asset, then the price goes up, and then people want to hoard it. So this is this strange concept of, I just don't see how many of this, you know, if they succeed at their user case, whether it's actually going to stay that user case. And we've seen that with Bitcoin. So you know, it's a really interesting dynamic, and really all we've seen in the world is that if you want stable money, there's only two ways that we've seen to do it, and that's central planning, whereby central banks inflate and deflate in order to create stability to set inflation and deflation goals, or a cryptocurrency that pegs itself to a fiat currency. Other than that, we haven't seen anything that's able to, you know, someone be able to consistently pay their rent in cryptocurrency and it still be the same price, where they're not going bankrupt or going incredibly rich based upon speculation and what's going on in that.
Yeah, that's true. Ansel.
Yeah, so the user case of the hoarding versus not spending, right? That's the deflation argument, that deflation actually hurts economic transactions when there's very little evidence. That's just something that has been told to us to scare us by the central banks, why they have to inflate. But I mean, if it's going up drastically, yes, I think if it's going up like 10x a year, that's true. But eventually we will steady out, you know, at a relatively low inflation, probably in the foreseeable future. So that just makes the entrepreneurs be better. They have to offer more value. Right. And so your asset allocation or your money allocation, whatever to your spending, is going to be much more conservative and sustainable. One thing we've seen with the ICOs and all the blockchain projects is that there's this flood of money, this irresponsible flood of money that has been pumped up mainly by Ethereum going crazy, and they have nothing to use it on. And so they use it to pump these ICOs, where Bitcoin, like in 2014, Bitcoin went up to 1,200, you know, but it started coming down, but people started spending it on actual things, where then the business had to go and cash out. So it put downward pressure on the price. But in Ethereum, we see that they're spending it on ICOs, right? And then the ICOs might invest it themselves on the next ICO. So there's very little like cashing out to fiat, but it's not based on fundamentals. It's just based on this big speculative bubble that's been built around Ethereum and ICOs. So anyway, that's all. I could go on and on, obviously.
Yeah. We're getting into some of the big fundamental battles here, which are just, it's always great to hear this kind of stuff and people that, you know, dissect, what's the digital gold and Ethereum, and it's all, I love it. I love this type of thing. I love these two guests. So remember, check out the link section below to learn more about Ansel and Simon. And of course, Ansel is going to be part of the World Crypto Network. His podcast you can already listen to, and it's going to be on the World Crypto Network too. And it's great to have him on board with all that. I'm really excited. I also want to say thank you to CryptoDoc in the super chat. He sent $10 and he said, "We will all be moving to Puerto Rico. No crypto taxes, and recapitalize a country that got wrecked by a hurricane." He also suggested that I get a guest on from Puerto Rico. And I think that is an excellent idea. I got to find, I know there are these guys that are moving to Puerto Rico. What's his name? The child actor guy is down there. But I want to get some. Yeah, Brock. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Brock Pierce is down there. He's got a whole. He's going all hippie down. It was some very interesting stories, and it's fascinating. I want to get some Puerto Ricans on here to talk about cryptocurrency. So if you're in Puerto Rico, if you know some of these guys, contact me at adam@trezorhelp.com, and we need to get some Puerto Rico. I need to do a Puerto Rican show. All right, and I haven't been in Puerto Rico since 2001. I guess I got to visit again. It's been a long time. I was quite young then. All right, so where are we going to go? So, okay, we're going to tie this show up real quick. We've been on for an hour. I quickly I know Ansel knows about this. I don't think in this little thing. The Be Private crypto dividend. Everybody knows I talk about these crypto dividends all the time, and this one was quite fascinating. It happened this week, and there was drama involved with Bittrex and Z Classic. And do you have any thoughts, Ansel, on Be Private specifically, or on the crypto dividend, getting your free crypto dividends by just being a holder of Bitcoin?
Obviously, I haven't been following this. Honestly, I haven't been following this very much, so I don't know. Is this the Z Classic and Bitcoin or whatever?
Yeah. I saw you tweet. I'd seen you actually tweeted about it, and or you retweeted something about it. So I thought you might have some thoughts. Yeah, it's basically every Bitcoin holder is getting basically their own version of Zcash, because that's what the Z Classic was. And every Z Classic holder gets a new coin to take the place of their Z Classic. I mean, we were talking about privacy before, Monero and everything, and I guess a better question is this privacy thing getting bigger? Privacy, is this going to be the latest hype we hear from altcoins and forks and stuff?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is going to be a growing theme in crypto about fungibility and privacy, because Bitcoin is we're getting to that point where we're going to have another soft fork debate on how do we get in more of this stuff. And I don't know if these large businesses like Coinbase or even the miners that are easily identifiable, if they can support this type of thing. So I think there is going to be a battle maybe in the next 18 months or so over fungibility and a soft fork.
Yeah, this is that's a good prediction there. Simon, any fungibility commentary, privacy, crypto dividends?
Yeah, I stopped following hard forks after Bitcoin Gold, and I rely on Adam and Andy Hoffman, who does a lot of content on this, to kind of stay up to date on these ones. But yeah, I lost interest after dumping Bitcoin Gold, and if Trezor gives me something, then I'll pay attention to it. But
that's actually a really good point. If Trezor gives me something, I think that's the default position of everyone now, and that's if these centralized crypto dividends want to be successful, the first thing they got to do is make a deal with Trezor somehow, and I don't know if that's even possible. But continue. Sorry.
Yeah, which is I guess that's a new centralization debate there that comes up. Is Trezor becoming powerful because they thought that they were giving people the ability to own their own money, but then it turns out that in the age of hard forks, everyone's relying upon them to actually support things because they don't want to move it out of Trezor. And while everyone does have their private keys, maybe that's becoming, the next conspiracy theory about somebody corrupting Trezor in order to support their hard fork, and that's probably the next conspiracy theory.
But it's interesting. They're the kingmaker. They're the kingmaker of top tier altcoins. Trezor is what you're saying. I mean, it's interesting, but we don't want to get that centralized. It is. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, continuing and closing off here, I think, I haven't been following hard forks too much since that one. Privacy is no doubt the next place that we need to now place our attention. We've got this whole debate of big blocks, Segwit, Lightning Network. We can all use empirical evidence now to determine where that goes. That's a positive step forward. Everyone can look at the chains, everyone can analyze the chains, and people can continue to start building, brilliant analysis around on-chain versus off-chain scaling, and we can just stop talking about it, and everyone can start building and prove it. But the next one is going to be privacy. You know, in the day and age when Wall Street and all the other banks are building businesses, you know, in the day and age when you've got CME futures trading, you know, we're going to have hard forks, and then everyone's going to have very strange scenarios of figuring out how they deal with these hard forks, which they're all in right now. And then that's also going to lead to, you know, people taking a stance as a regulated institution. How are you going to deal with privacy as it becomes more private? And then you still have to follow those regulated rules. That's going to be, you know, that will be the next split. And that will be the cause of another 3 years of debate. And the reason that we only get that debate in Bitcoin is because no one controls Bitcoin. You can have that debate in Zcash. You can have that debate in, you know, many of these other altcoins. But because they're so easy to change and switch, you don't have the same contention, and you don't have a 3-year debate about how to do it. And the reason you do have it with Bitcoin is because it is decentralized, and no one player or party has all the power in this network. So, yeah, I'll close by saying, Ansel, thank you for stimulating content. Can't wait to see your show, and I look forward to hearing more of your content. And Adam, keep up the work, keep up the great work. Strong hands, golden hold, pound that like button.
Oh wow, man! I like to hear you say that, man. And a very good point about Bitcoin governance and decentralization. It is a positive thing, and yeah, we're going to have big debates in the future. People, get ready to have a strong hand, and just don't get flooded out, because people are going to say debate is a bad thing. The debate is not a bad thing. Conversations are good things. That's free speech right there. Ansel, your conclusionary thoughts.
Oh no, nice talking to you, Simon and Adam. This is a very good show, very valuable show for the Bitcoin ecosystem. The hold, the hodler mentality, that is super, super important. And Adam's doing God's work, so that's very cool.
Oh
and yes,
God.
I am. I have joined the WCN. Just I'm going to be included on their feed with my show. And thanks for picking me or asking me, WCN, and I look forward to it.
Wow. Well, thank you for the compliments, guys. And seriously, you guys are awesome guests. Thank you for being on the show today, both of you, taking your time from, you know, in the United States or England. And here in Australia, it is, when Darwin, it is past 2:30 in the morning. So I should probably go to sleep. That's a good idea. It's good to get your 8 hours of sleep. That's your health tip of the day, everyone. So check out the link section below, and you will see Ansel and Simon's Twitter feeds. They are prolific on there. You'll learn a lot about them. Check them out. Pound that like button. Check out the archives. I do this Week in Bitcoin show every Friday, and I do a new show on this channel every single day. So keep on tuning in. Spread the word. I'm Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, Disrupt Meister. Remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video. Good night. I'll talk to you all later. Thank you, everybody in the live chat, and everybody who watched this. See ya. All right.